Right, so this lesson is entitled Buddhism in India and Beyond. And this is part 2 of a 4-part series on classical India. Right, and before we get started, I want you to be ready to compare and contrast Christianity and Buddhism. This will be an in-class essay that we will do as a part of this unit. This will be one of our timed essays for this unit. I want to set some hooks here. And then as I go through this lecture, you'll have a good idea of what to look for. You should have already done the Roman history lesson part 3 that focuses on Rome and Christianity. So you should have a good idea of what I'm talking about when I talk about Palestine, right? The region that Jesus was born in and the region that Jesus conducted his ministry in. The India stuff is obviously new learning. So, keep these hooks in mind as you go through this lesson, and hopefully, there's little aha moments or little bells going off in your head, like, yeah, that's just a lot, that's like early Christianity. Oh, yeah, I remember that. And this is going to carry into the next lesson on India as well. So, stay focused on this issue because this will be a timed essay that we have coming up. Right, so let me go through the list here. So, like I said, be prepared to compare and contrast Christianity and Buddhism. We want to think about the political situations in India and Palestine, the economic situations in India and Palestine, the fact that these are both revealed religions. And what we mean by that is that it's revealed by a single person, a single guy, who's kind of like a prophet. We don't usually call either of those guys prophets, but they are, men who have a special connection to God and a special knowledge that they share with everyone else. They're the kind of main teacher of the religion. And then we want to look at the effects of these religions on India and Rome. In upcoming lessons, we're also going to look at the impacts of Buddhism on, Vietnam and China and Korea and, Japan as well. So that's what I mean when I say Buddhism beyond India. Right, so, once again, we're going to focus on these religious conflicts in Hinduism, and we know about the caste system and the fact that this is a highly stratified society, right? Stratified meaning that it has levels. Right, so lots of inequality in Hinduism. There's no movement through merit, right? So this is very different from China and really different from Christianity as well. In Christianity, one goes to heaven or one goes to hell based on their merits, based on how they act and the good and bad things they do, or the good things they do and the good things they don't do. And so you've got this idea of religion being used to hold people up or hold people down, or really hold people down. You got to remember that the Indian kings of the Ganges region were very violent and very oppressive. People are just poor and they're suffering. I mean, this is a very unhappy time in India, specifically up in the north along the Ganges. And so into this time period, into this violent political and economic situation, there's a young man named Siddhartha Gautama, right? And Siddhartha is born into a wealthy warrior family, right? He's a Kshatriya, the second to top level of the Hindu caste, right below the Brahmins. And so he's born into one of these northern Indian kingdoms in the 5th century, and I should have put BCE in there, I'm sorry. His father, who was the king, was given a prophecy by a wandering ascetic, right? One of these holy men who wander around and do religious stuff and starve and beg and stuff like that. He was given by one of these wandering ascetics, told his father, your son is going to see suffering in the world, and that's going to turn him into a great man of religion. King doesn't want to hear that, right? King's father wants him to be a king just like him, right? Take over the throne, etc. And so he kind of keeps his son Siddhartha in a life of luxury and pleasure, kind of inside the palace, inside the walls, in the pleasure gardens, the beautiful women, the racehorses, the hunting, all the good, the strong drink, all the fun stuff, right? But, Siddhartha's a young man. You guys are young men and young women. You understand how rebellious young men and young women can be against their parents. And Siddhartha sneaks out into the world, and he witnesses great suffering. He sees it, and it makes a very deep impression on this sensitive young man. And so he gives up his claim to his father's throne and becomes a student of religion, and he becomes one of these ascetic, wandering holy men. And he, over the course of the next, it's a lot of years, like 10, 15 years, he follows many, many gurus, right? This is an Indian word. It's a religious teacher. The word guru is a teacher, right? He follows many gurus and becomes very extreme in his asceticism. He even pushes himself to the point of death. He almost starves to death. He wants holiness so much and separation from the world so much that it almost kills him. But it's when he's at the moment of death, starving because of his religiousness, that he comes to realize two key ideas, and he becomes the Buddha, right? So this is a transformation that he goes through. This transformation, right? We want to think about the hero's journey, right? We studied the hero's journey in Unit 1. Kind of similar to Jesus's temptations out in the wilderness. Remember, Jesus goes out into the wilderness and is tempted 3 times. We're going to see in the life of Muhammad, the founder of Islam, the same kind of journey out into the wilderness, journey into the other place, and this transformation, right? But for Buddha, he's just kind of sitting there, and he's at the moment of death. And he realizes these two ideas, right? And the first is that humans should follow the middle way. They shouldn't be too sensuous, right? They shouldn't live for pleasure, pleasures of the flesh, pleasures of food, pleasures of drink, nor should humans be too ascetic, right? But the humans have to live in the world and follow the middle way. This is kind of a little bit more similar to Confucianism. And that if humans follow the middle way and they get rid of all desires and attachments, right, that they will achieve nirvana. And when a human achieves nirvana, it's a kind of mental state and a state of one's soul. They will end the cycle of reincarnation, right? For the Buddhists, the world is pain, and reincarnation is pain, and life is suffering, and you don't want to be reincarnated. You want to achieve nirvana and be there forever. It's kind of like heaven on earth, but then heaven after death as well. And it comes from getting rid of desires. It comes from getting rid of attachments and really freeing one's mind so that you're not attached to pleasure, you're not attached to pain. Neither one of those are a big deal to you. It's just you've kind of all let it go and you let life happen. And if you can do that, you will achieve nirvana and you'll never have to be born and live and suffer again. Right? And, you know, you're going to see some similarities here to Jesus, right? The Buddha taught that anyone could reach nirvana. And so this is a direct challenge to the caste system. Remember that Hindus believe that the Brahmins have all the special stuff, the untouchables are, you know, life is terrible for them. Buddha says no. Anyone can achieve nirvana. Again, it's kind of one of these merit-based systems. It's up to the individual's merits. Just like in Christianity, it's up to the individual's merits to achieve nirvana or achieve heaven. Right? He also taught that the rituals are not the path to salvation. Right? You don't become saved, you don't go to nirvana because of rituals and laws and rules. You go through merit. You achieve self-mastery. You achieve enlightenment. This is a direct challenge to the Brahmins because if people don't need the rituals, they don't need the Brahmins, and then the Brahmins are out of a job. Right? It's very similar to what Jesus did. He said, you know, it's about love. It's about peace. It's about finding one's relationship with God. You don't have to go to a temple. You don't have to follow a bunch of laws. And obviously that, you know, made the rulers of Judaism at that time very angry. And, you know, look at what they did to Jesus. Now, Buddha wasn't killed the way Jesus was, so there's a contrast. There's a difference. But that same anger and frustration at the teachings is very similar. So, similar teachings, different results for the Buddha and Jesus, right? And so you can see that, you know, the Buddha gained a lot of followers from the lower castes. Suddenly the untouchables can achieve, you know, sacred status. They can be saved. Right? This is just like Jesus, right? Poor people love Jesus. Prostitutes love Jesus. Drug addicts love Jesus because anybody can get to heaven. I realize I'm preaching now, but I'm trying to show you the connections between these two religious leaders. Right? And so Buddha's followers also developed a kind of mythology that showed him doing miracles, kind of turned that, you know, heaven, nirvana becomes a kind of heaven, or, you know, they kind of developed this idea of hell that's full of torture and evil ghosts, right? If you're too attached to life, if you're too attached to pleasure, these evil ghosts can come get you. And this was probably a mixture of Buddhism and local folk religions. And this is an important idea. Let me get that control button out of the way. Right? This is what we call syncretism, right? This mixing, right? We talk about the mixing of cultures. We talk about the mixing of religions. We talk about the mixing of art styles and art forms. That's syncretism. So, you know, Buddhism went through this syncretism mixing that we don't really see in early Christianity. We see it in later Christianity in places like the Caribbean, but those are lessons we're going to do next year. So, you know, some similarities and differences here as well. Right? And like I said, Buddhism spreads throughout Asia, you know, into Southeast Asia and Indonesia and Malaysia, north into China, Korea, Japan, down into Vietnam, places like that, right? And so this is something more that we're going to look at in period 3 of world history. You know, we're going to look at the political impacts of Buddhism on India in our next lesson, but when we look at the impacts of Buddhism on the rest of the world, that's not going to be till period 3 of world history, which will be our next unit this spring. Okay, so stay tuned. I just wanted you to see where we're going with this, right? So that's it. Lots of information there on Buddhism. You might want to go back and review the Rome and Christianity lesson, because like I said, we're going to have a timed essay here in the next few weeks. Thanks for watching.